You guys want to talk to one of the leading Republican commentators in the country? Well, whether you want it or not, here it comes. Larry Elder ran against Gavin Newsom in the recall election. He was the Republican candidate. He's a political commentator. He was on over 300 radio stations before that. He's now with Epoch Times. You can find it at larrywithepoch.com. You can also find his documentaries at uncletom.com. Don't blame me, he named it that. Larry, welcome to the Young Turks.
Jake, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Larry, you and I had a huge debate back in 2004, I think, at one of the conventions. Good to see you again. So my guess is that we won't have found much agreement since then. So let's find out. So first,
unless you reverse yourself, Jank, I know you used to be a conservative. I have no idea what the hell happened, but unless you go in reverse, I got a feeling we're going to have a few disagreements today.
Indeed. No, I have not reversed myself. So Larry, you ran for governor in California. Now you're thinking of running for president. But the big dog says he's getting in the race a little bit later this week. Then you got Ron DeSantis. So why would you run for president if you've already got the beloved Donald Trump who's going to do it?
I assume by the big dog you mean Donald Trump.
Yes.
And of course he's going to run. He's been running ever since he left the White House and has always been plotting to come back. My goal is not to displace him or displace Ron DeSantis if he runs, or Mike Pompeo if he runs. I think he will. Nikki Haley, I think she will. It's because in addition to the other issues of the economy and inflation and energy independence and the porous borders, there are a couple of things, Jank, I think I bring to the table that some of the others don't. One is, I think the number one social problem facing America and facing the Black community in general is a large number of kids who enter the world without a father married to the mother. In 1965, 25% of Black kids entered the world without a father married to the mother. Now that number is 70%. 25% of white kids now into the world without a father married to the mother. Half of Hispanic kids, 40% of all American kids enter the world without a father married to the mother. It is a scandal, and neither party spends very much time talking about it. What I believe happened, Jank, is that the welfare state has incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And forget about Elder. Barack Obama once said a kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. The second issue I think I bring to the table is to debunk this ridiculous notion that America is systemically racist. Obama got a higher percentage of the white vote than John Kerry did 4 years earlier. Racism has never been a less significant problem in America today. The polls show that only a handful of people refuse to vote for a Black person if they feel he or she is qualified. That was not the case back in the 1950s when Gallup first asked that question. But a lot of Black people believe, and a lot of white liberals believe, that racism remains a major problem in America. And I believe, in my opinion, I know you'll disagree, that Democrats do this to make sure that Blacks are concerned about so-called social justice and less concerned about taxes and spending and regulation and inflation and jobs the way everybody else is.
Okay, so a lot to tackle there. So I think, look, I'm married, I'm happy about it. I got 2 wonderful kids, and I know the statistics that say that marriage, if you're married, the kids have a better shot, et cetera. And there's some logic to it, obviously, because of the dual income situation. But that's in my opinion, even though I'm married, I think it's an outdated institution. But I'm not going to argue marriage with you. But really? On that, hold on. On that issue, though, I do have just one question for you, which is, do you think people should be allowed to make their own decisions? I mean, so I got married, but other people don't want to get married. So what? What am I going to do? Make them get married? What's the solution?
Well, no. Of course not. I'm not married. However, if I had a child, I would make sure that I was married before I had that child. You know, there are think tanks on the left and think tanks on the right, like the Brookings Institution on the left and the American Enterprise Institute on the right. They don't agree about very much, but they do agree that in order to escape poverty, you need to do a handful of things. Number one, finish high school. Number 2, don't have a kid before you're 20. Number 3, get married before you have that kid. Number 4, get a job. Don't quit that job till you get another job, and avoid the criminal justice system. You do those things, you will not be poor. Unfortunately, a lot of people in this country are not doing those things, and as a result, we have a lot of social problems that we wouldn't have if we didn't start with kids entering the world, as I said earlier, without a father in the house.
So are you disgusted with Herschel Walker?
No, I'm not. I like Herschel Walker. I supported his campaign. And I know about the allegations. He's denied many of them, but he does recognize, as I do, that it is important for a child to have a father in the home.
Does he? Because he doesn't seem to have acted that way in his life. He seems to have had many children without getting married to their moms. And then he's had children he could have had, but apparently had aborted. So that seems like the poster child of the exact opposite of what you want, Larry, doesn't it?
Well, he's not recommending that you bring children to the world without a father married to the mother. You know, there are a lot of people who've made mistakes. One of whom is Kweisi Mfume. Kweisi Mfume is a longtime congressman from Maryland, a Democrat. He used to be the president of the NAACP. I think he had 4 or 5 kids outside of wedlock with 4 or 5 different women. He recognizes that it was wrong, it was a mistake. He's maintained a good relationship with his kids, he says, but he certainly would not recommend that people follow his course.
Yeah, Herschel Walker has not maintained a good relationship with the kids that he never even admitted to, et cetera. But we get it, we can move on. So on the issue of race, Larry, there's 1,000 ways to tackle that. But here, I'll start with my own background and ethnicity. So I'm atheist now, but I was born Muslim, raised Muslim. And Donald Trump said that when he was running for office in 2015, 2016, he said that we should ban all Muslims from the country until we figure out, quote, what the hell is going on. I got news for you, Donald Trump's never gonna figure out what the hell's going on. So how am I not supposed to take umbrage with that? Am I supposed to agree to discrimination against myself?
He didn't say ban all Muslims. He was talking about certain countries where they were failed countries.
No. On the campaign, Larry, let's be clear. When he became president, they told him that he couldn't do that, so he tried to amend it. But on the campaign trail, he very clearly said ban all Muslims until we figure out what the hell's going on.
Well, I like to see the statement and see it in context, but I'll accept what you said. Donald Trump says a lot of things that I don't agree with. He says a lot of things that are sloppy. He's not the most articulate person in the world, not the most precise speaker in the world. That said, I thought he did a great job as president. And the analogy I always use, Cenk, is this. I was watching a golf channel once. I'm not a good golfer, but I enjoy the sport. And a woman was asking these 2 golfers, how can you tell if a golfer's a good golfer? And one of them went through a beautiful, elaborate discussion mechanically of what makes a good golfer, where he puts his hand, where he puts his feet, how he keeps his head. And the other one said, I look to see where the ball lands. Well, I like where the ball was landing under Donald Trump on immigration, on the economy, on what he did with foreign policy, on the 3 people that he got on the Supreme Court. So I don't pay attention to the swing. He says a lot of things that I wouldn't say. He puts things a lot way I wouldn't put it. He tweets things I wouldn't tweet. I consider that to be, pardon the expression, white noise. I like where the ball is landing.
White noise is an apt description, but Larry, that goes to.
I said, pardon the expression.
Yeah, but Larry, that does go to the point here, because I'm not arguing whether Trump was a good president or not. That's a hilarious conversation and one we could have later. But you said you don't understand why people think that the Republican Party or Donald Trump is racist. I mean, so I mentioned the Muslim issue, but I have one of those for every single race and ethnicity. So when he was talking to Republican Jewish leaders, he said no room likes to negotiate and renegotiate more than this room. Obviously anti-Semitic. When talking about Puerto Ricans, he called them lazy, and that's why they couldn't recover from the hurricane that hit them instead of his own incompetence. When talking about the Central Park 5 Black and Latino kids in New York that were wrongly accused of a crime they did not do, a heinous crime. Rape, murder, etc. When they were proven innocent, he said, who cares? They should go to, they probably did something. These are all over the top racist and bigoted comments. Can you not see why we would think that he was racist? And the Republican Party that celebrates him and voted for him on many occasions, therefore is also racist.
Well, there's a lot to unpack with what you just now said, Cenk. Regarding the Central Park 5, I believe they were guilty. I don't think Donald Trump was wrong about that. I think Ken Burns' documentary was completely wrong. I spoke with the officer in question. By the way, he happened to be a black guy. He was not interviewed in the documentary that Ken Burns did. And he is convinced that these boys did in fact commit the crime. But I don't want to debate that.
That's insane, Larry. I got to tell the audience real quick. They were exonerated by the justice system. The DNA of the actual killer was found at the crime scene. So I don't want misinformation on this channel. That's crazy talk.
You said killer. Nobody was killed.
Sorry,
you're right.
the
DNA
rapist. Thank you for the clarification.
the DNA of another person was found there. There's no question about that. But during the trial, if you watch the trial, they said that we did not get everybody who was involved. And these boys were not just charged with penetration; they were charged with holding her down and many other crimes related to the rape.
The guy had nothing to do with the kids. They don't even know each other. Go on, but just I want the audience to know they were totally innocent.
I believe they were guilty, and I urge you to read some of the columns that Ann Coulter wrote about the Central Park Five, and then make your assessment. I also did a documentary about this for Epoch Times. I urge you to take a look at that, where I interviewed the man who was the lead investigator, and then you make up your own mind whether or not I'm right or whether or not Cenk is right.
Yeah, but let's get back. By the way, just again for clarification, the justice system, prosecutors, everyone involved said they did not do it. They were innocent and they were released. So
no, they didn't. The two lead prosecutors still maintain that these boys were.
No, I don't mean guilty. The original prosecutors who ruined those kids' lives for their own goddamn careers. Of course, they're going to lie about it. I mean, the current day prosecutors who say, no, we found the guy and now we're prosecuting him, the actual guy who did it. But again, I don't want to get stuck on that for the whole interview. People can check out the actual truth for themselves, no matter what Ann Coulter wrote about it.
Dick, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, you know what the canons of ethics are. The prosecutors have to do justice. And if there's evidence that these boys were innocent, the prosecutors have to then argue and make sure that they are not prosecuted. The lead prosecutors in this case still maintain that these boys were in fact guilty.
Okay, I think they're goddamn liars and deeply immoral, but we can move on. So all the litany of different racist things that Donald Trump said, are you gonna say, no, none of them were racist or some of them were, but so what, deal with it.
Let's talk about, if you don't mind, the litany of racist things that Joe Biden has said. He told Charlemagne the God, you ain't really black if you don't wanna vote for me. What the hell is that? Telling somebody that they're not really black unless you vote Democrat. He said it to an audience of a bunch of black people about Mitt Romney. He wants to put y'all back in chains. He's lied consistently for decades about his alleged civil rights record, claims he went to the black church where he would strategize how to desegregate restaurants and movie theaters in Wilmington, Delaware. A New York Times investigated, zero evidence he ever did any of that. Black members of the church said they never saw him. He lied and said that he was with Andy Young when he tried to visit Nelson Mandela during apartheid South Africa. No evidence whatsoever that he did that. He's lied repeatedly about his alleged civil rights record. Why? In order to curry favor with black people, never mind insulting them and lying to them about what he's done. I consider that to be pretty racist. He said that Barack Obama was the first light-skinned, clean African-American. He's never met a clean African-American before. What is that?
Yeah, so Larry, good news for you. Unlike right-wing media, we don't lie. So whether you think those are racist or not, we have shared almost every one of those with our audience. We've criticized Biden deeply for every one of those incidents. So we're not like mainstream media. We have pointed out every single thing that you mentioned and deeply criticized them for it.
I never said you didn't. I'm just saying that when you talk about how racist Donald Trump is, let's look at some of the ridiculously racist things that Joe Biden has said. He said that black kids were just as smart as, just as talented as white kids. What is that? I mean, honestly, he's made bonehead comment like that after bonehead comment like that. If not bigoted, racist, certainly boneheaded, and both parties
Larry,
have done that.
there's still a giant difference. Why is there a giant difference? Because Joe Biden has said a lot of dumb things and bad things. And by the way, lies, the lies drive me nuts. And what he said about being with Nelson Mandela, we emphasize that a ton on this show because it's a totally unacceptable lie. But Joe Biden as president has not tried to implement anything that was bigoted. Whereas Donald Trump came in and as one of many examples, he instantly said, I don't want trans people in the military. These people who said, we will die for this country, we love this country so much, said, I don't want you because you're not the right kind of person. I don't want equality for all. I want to discriminate against you. So that is him. And by the way, he's had his Justice Department go to court and argue in favor of bigotry against LGBTQ folks in many different instances. So those are him actually applying the bigotry. That's an enormous difference between him and Biden.
Well, Joe Biden has done a lot of things as president that I have objected to, just as ferociously as you objected to what you just now said. I think Joe Biden, with a stroke of a pen, relieving about $500 billion of student debt was illegal and wrong and should not have done it the way he
You think
pulled out
that's
of
the same as
Afghanistan.
bigotry and racism?
We're talking about his record as a president. I think what Donald Trump has done for the economy was outstanding. What he did for the borders was outstanding. What he did on judges was outstanding. Everybody can quarrel with certain kinds of things that people have said. I don't think you dismiss Donald Trump just because of what he said about trans people. I mean, my goodness. If I did that, I could dismiss Joe Biden for lying and saying that the student debt forgiveness program was ratified by Congress, and then he signed the bill after 2 or 3 was passed by Congress with 2 or 3 votes, and he signed the bill when it was in fact an executive order. He claimed that his son died in Iraq when his son died of cancer stateside. He said that gasoline was $5 a gallon, was less than $5. Was $5 a gallon when he became president, when in fact it was half that. He's made all sorts of bonehead statements, blunders, and done things like reversing our energy independence that I object to. So I look at the entire record, not just 1 or 2 things.
Okay, so I can debate every one of those things with you, except there's many that I wouldn't debate. Joe Biden has said many boneheaded things, and he often states things that are not true. And we call him out on that because our job is to do the news and not to do propaganda. So I want to move to another article that you wrote. This is tangent. It's a similar topic. You take great offense at Joe Biden talking about how Republicans are semi-fascist. I would say for the Republicans supporting Donald Trump, I would take the semi out. So I guess you're going to take even deeper offense at that. But let me set it up for you so that you could answer it.
I very much do, and it's a tactic that Democrats have done for decades. Yeah. They call Ronald Reagan a fascist. They call George W. Bush a fascist. George Soros compared him to Joseph Goebbels. I mean, Democrats do that all the time. And no matter who it is, if it's Ron DeSantis who will be the candidate in 2024, believe me, he'll be called a fascist as well. That's how Democrats roll.
So Larry, the good news is you're not talking to a standard Democrat or an establishment Democrat. In fact, today on the show, on the Young Turks, I said Ron DeSantis is not a fascist, but Donald Trump is, and I explained the distinction. The distinction is Donald Trump, when he lost an election, refused to leave like a fascist.
That's awfully generous of you to not call Ron DeSantis a fascist.
I am. I'm very merciful like that. And so, and in fact, even during the Bush era, when they're starting illegal wars, they're doing anything that the corporations want, which by the way is fairly standard in American politics. They're doing torture, they're doing illegal wiretapping. I used to use the quote of Sandra Day O'Connor about how we should avoid the beginnings, those beginnings so we could avoid the ends when referring to fascism, saying that, hey, look, these are dangerous things, but we never went to the word fascist. The reason we went to the word fascist, I did, and some hosts of TYT did with Donald Trump, is because he wouldn't leave when he had lost an election. And and it's not just that, Larry. Today, John Kelly, his former chief of staff, with one of many laws that Donald Trump broke, asking McCabe and Comey to be investigated, his political opponents to be investigated by the IRS, deeply illegal, deeply unconstitutional. And he kept telling John Kelly what he says every time. I don't give a goddamn about the laws of America. They're my opponents and I want you to do it. You know who says that? A goddamn fascist says it. So tell me otherwise.
Well, let's talk about fascism. Fascism, of course, is totalitarianism. Socialism is when the government owns the means of production. Fascism is when the government allows you to own the means of production, but then tells you how to produce. I'll give you an example. Barack Obama passed a bill that required every man, woman, and child to purchase health care insurance, whether they wanted it, whether they needed it, or whether they could afford it. What do you call that? I think there's a word for that. You might even use the F word for stuff like that. I think, again, using the stroke of a pen and forgiving student debt, something that even Nancy Pelosi a year ago said that Joe Biden did not have the power to do. There's a word for that. There's a word for what Obama did with DACA. Even he said when he ran for president, he didn't have the power to grant legal status to illegal immigrants, and then became president and proceeded to do that. What do you call that?
So I have an exact answer to your question. So I'll take one of the examples that you gave, Nancy Pelosi saying that Joe Biden does not have the authority to do student debt relief. The reason she says that is because her top donors are bankers. And she doesn't want student debt relief because she's a corporatist. That's the word you're looking for. Corporatism runs this country, both for the great majority of the Republican Party and the great majority of the Democratic Party. They work for their corporate donors. That's why it was shocking that Biden did student debt relief, which I give him tremendous credit for, because that's a very rare thing the government does that actually goes to the American people as opposed to their corporate donors. So the word you're looking for is corporatism. The Republican Party loves it, and it is destroying this country.
Well, if by corporatism you mean that America, the government is too big, takes too much, taxes too much, regulates too much, you and I are on the same side of the line. In 1900, at all three levels, federal, state, and local, the government took less than 10% from the American people. Today, when you throw in the cost of so-called unfunded mandates, the government almost takes half of what the American people can produce. So I agree with you. Government's too big, too intrusive, and takes money away from people. There are four ways of spending money, from the most efficient to the least efficient. The most efficient is your money on yourself. Next, second is your money on somebody you care about. Third is when you have a boss and you have an expense account, his money on you, but you have to be careful, otherwise you get fired. The least efficient, most wasteful way of spending is somebody else's money on somebody else, and both parties engage in that. I don't disagree with that.
So there's two things that I want to clarify here. First, just real quick on socialism. Socialism is not the same thing as communism. What you described as communism, and I'm definitely against that. And by the way, I call myself a capitalist, but to be fair to the socialists, Norway is socialist, and it's a perfectly lovely country, and it's not as you described it. Now, in terms of whether the government is too big, I did not say that the government was too big. I did not accuse
you of being a communist. I just said the definition of socialism.
No, I know you didn't. You said the definition of socialism, which is actually the definition of communism.
Fascism is when the government allows you to own means of production, but tells you how to produce. And I gave you a couple of examples of things that happen on the left.
Your definition of socialism is just wrong. What the definition you read is of communism, not of socialism. So that's what I wanted to correct. So, but let's go to your argument about whether the government's too big. I didn't say the government is too big. I said the government is too corrupt. There's a giant difference. Should the government be big or small? Well, doesn't it depend? It depends on what we're doing. So if you say the government should be big enough to give out Social Security, I love that and I agree with that, and the American people overwhelmingly agree with that, even though that's a large enterprise. On the other hand, if you say the government should be so big that we needlessly invade Iraq, I disagree. I don't want the government to be that big. I don't want the government to be big enough to eavesdrop on all of us. It isn't the question of whether the government is too big or too small. It's the question of who does the government serve? Does it serve public interest, all of us like in a democracy, or private interest? And the way that we have it set up right now, Larry, large donors and corporations can give through independent expenditures and 1,000 other ways, basically bribes to all of our politicians, and then they purchase them, and then they do exactly as the people who bribed them tell them to. The government isn't too big, it's too corrupt.
May I respond?
Yes.
Of course, the issue is whether or not government is too large. This debate was had and your side lost. It's called Article 1, Section 8, where they laid out a handful of duties and responsibilities of the federal government, and many of the things that the government does are not in there at all. The founding fathers did not even have an income tax because they expected government to be small. And regarding all of this corporatism that you talk about, there's a First Amendment right to redress grievances. It's called lobbying. If the government wasn't so big, there wouldn't be so many people lobbying the government to move laws.
No, they would lobby to make it bigger.
So it seems to me that you ought to be on the same side of Larry Elder and want government to be small, and as a result, corporations would not have that much to lobby about because government would not have its fingers in everything.
No, Larry, the government was small. Then lobbyists came in and lobbied for it to get larger, and it did get larger. Okay, and by the way, they don't always lobby for it to get larger. Oftentimes, hold on, Larry, let me finish. Oftentimes they argue for the government to get smaller, as in deregulation. Why? Because they don't want cops on Wall Street. They want to be, they're the robbers on Wall Street. They don't want the cops. So oftentimes they shrink the government so they could rob us more effectively. That's corporatism. But Larry, I also read that, and I noticed in your response to that you did not defend Social Security. It seemed like you were saying in one of your articles that you would cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid if you were president. Is that true?
No, I would not cut any of them. We've made promises. We need to abide by those promises. But I will tell you that all three of the major so-called entitlements programs, I think it's an unfair term, are unsustainable. I didn't just say that. Obama said it. Bill Clinton said it. And so down the road, we're going to have to do something with younger workers because the money is simply not going to be there for them.
And so, for example, we could raise taxes on the rich, and then the money would be there for them. But my guess is you're going to say raise the retirement age or somehow take it away from the people who would actually receive Social Security.
Or down the road, offer the people who are putting their money in Social Security a higher rate of return by allowing them to direct at least some of the funds into things like the stock market.
Oh, great idea. When it crashes, of course, everybody on Wall Street gets rich again, but the average American gets robbed. I think you're obviously misunderstanding the core of the problem, but you think I'm misunderstanding it, and we just had a healthy conversation about it, okay? So if you want to check out Larry, you can go to larrywithepic.com or uncletom.com. Larry, thank you for joining us, I appreciate it.
Thank you, and read Article 1, Section 8. Take care, Jay.
I read it, unlike Donald Trump, who's never read the Constitution in his life. All right, thank you, Larry.
Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show. No,
we'll see. Poor
Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy. Everyone should be lucky enough to have a John Iadarola in their life.
You confused everyone.
Okay, sorry. I thought it was pretty clear.
Take a break now.
You can turn me to Dr. Manhattan as long as I get what Dr. Manhattan's packing, okay?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
D'Emilio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Iadarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Guns, baby.
You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast?
Mm-hmm. That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
I hope that, who they choose for the White House isn't just a borderline Klansman. That's all we gotta hope.
That's it, we will settle it.
She's cute. I didn't say that about Laura Ingraham.
Scandal at TYT. Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't.
You're a good boss.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip in the Republicans. See, don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
What's happening? I'm Dr. Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey. Here's the bottom line. I play no games about policy, period. Too many people's lives are at stake. So here's what I do. I challenge conservative ideology that hinders the growth of this country. I make sure we place our facts in proper context, and I have no problem debating anyone on a position that I have. Progressives have the ideas to change the world, but when you really look at it, progressives have always change this world for the better. I want you to tune into my new show, Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, right here on the TYT network, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'll see you there.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a jam-packed show for you today. Later in the program, we'll talk about the latest in regard to legislation protecting marriage equality. There's some big news out of the Senate today with some caveats that I think we need to focus on. So we'll discuss that. Later, we'll also talk about new analysis showing just how much of a difference COVID vaccination denial made in regard to COVID-related deaths between Democrats and Republicans. Did that play a role in the midterm elections? Well, we'll talk about that and give you the data. We'll also discuss some of the reactions to Donald Trump's announcement just last night that he is in fact running for president in 2024. So while the Republican establishment certainly seems united against him, I would warn everyone to be cautious because I still think Trump has a pretty good shot at winning the Republican nomination. I'll make that case later in the first hour. Second hour, John Iadarola will be joining us and we'll talk about some of the pending changes that Musk has referenced for Twitter during a recent hearing that he had to testify at. So lots to get to today, but as always, just want to encourage you to like and share the stream if you're watching us online on YouTube. And if you're not a member, you can become one by going to tyt.com/join. We're gonna have an awesome post game today, including one of the most embarrassing moments for Kari Lake. Oh, it's just so good. Sorry, I was savoring it just as I was thinking about it. But anyway, we gotta move on. Why don't we start with some of the bigger news of the day, including updates to marriage equality. In a surprising display of actual bipartisanship in the Senate of all places, the Respect for Marriage Act has passed 62 to 37, meaning that the vote easily passes the legislative filibuster in the upper chamber in the Senate. Now, here's what the bill entails, okay? There are caveats here. While I want to be celebratory, while I want to feel good about this, I have some major problems with the way the Senate version of the bill was written. The Respect for Marriage Act would require that people be considered married in any state as long as the marriage was valid in the state where it was performed. Okay, we're gonna pause right there. Okay, let's come back to me. Let's come back to me. So if you're living in one of these red states that likes to punish its constituents by passing, anti-same-sex marriage laws, well, you wouldn't be able to get married in those states should this conservative Supreme Court decide to reverse the Supreme Court ruling earlier back in 2012 that legalized same-sex marriage federally, right? So if they reverse it and this legislation comes into play, what it would mean is some states could still ban same-sex marriage. You would just need to go to a state that has not banned same-sex marriage, get married there, and then the backward state that you live in would have no choice but to recognize your same-sex marriage. So there's a lot of this states' rights language in the way that this was written. It's still some protection for same-sex marriage, so I'll take it. But these caveats do make me incredibly uncomfortable. Let's get to the rest of it. The bill would also repeal the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act, good, which defined marriage as the union of one man and one woman and allowed states to decline to recognize same-sex marriages performed in other states. That part I'm totally in favor of. The law has remained on the books, by the way, that Defense of Marriage Act, despite being declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court's ruling in Obergefell versus Hodges, okay? So that was the Supreme Court ruling earlier in 2012 that legalized same-sex marriage. Now, the Republicans who voted for this bill should probably get a little bit of a shout out, especially since there was a tremendous amount of pressure among conservative media pundits to vote against this legislation, and they voted for it anyway. So that includes a lot of people I don't like, to be honest with you, but nonetheless, you've got Roy Blunt, Richard Burr, Shelley Moore Capito, Susan Collins, Cynthia Loomis, Rob Portman, Dan Sullivan, Mitt Romney, Tom Tillis, Lisa Murkowski, Joni Ernst, Todd Young. It is notable that even though Democrats have such a slim majority in Congress, certainly that's the case with the Senate, they found a way to make this happen when it came to same-sex marriage, and we should celebrate that. That's a good thing. But when they had a supermajority under the Obama administration, certainly in the first 2 years of his administration, they just couldn't pass protections for reproductive rights on a federal level. They just couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. It was the blue dog Democrats. They had such a difficult time with that. Anyway, clearly they weren't interested in codifying abortion rights, and Obama ran on it, and then immediately, as soon as he got elected, said it wasn't a priority. It's not a priority at this time. Okay, great. Further reinforcing what I had already come to believe, which is that when it comes to women, they're usually not first in line. They're not considered a priority when it comes to these types of issues, right? So forced birth, forced pregnancy, they just don't have the will to fight, to prevent that from happening to us. And I'm specifically talking about Democrats here. Nonetheless, let's move on. Let's go back to celebrating some protection for same-sex marriage. There are some downsides here, though. For instance, Senator Rob Portman noted that the bill would not require any state to perform same-sex marriages if it chooses not to, which I think is unsurprising considering, should the Supreme Court reverse a previous Supreme Court ruling that legalizes same-sex marriage, nationally? Well, yeah, according to this legislation, some states can just outright ban same-sex marriage, but they would have to recognize same-sex marriage if the couple ended up getting married in a state that has it legalized. And to be clear, this bill does not codify Obergefell v. Hodges. It just doesn't, okay? Because if it did codify it, then same-sex marriage would be legal, it would be the law of the land, no state could ban it. And to be quite honest, I see same-sex marriage as a civil rights issue. And when it comes to civil rights issues, the federal government should offer protections for people, okay? So think about it. We consider it a civil rights issue in terms of people of color, right? Businesses, for instance, are not allowed to discriminate against individuals based on the color of their skin, based on their race. And that's because of federal protections that ensure that this type of discrimination is unacceptable. This bill, by the way, that just passed in the Senate also protects interracial marriage, which, it's 2022, great. The fact that we even need to do this at this point in time is insane, but at least it mentions it and we have some protections for interracial marriage. But nonetheless, just going back to same-sex marriage, we're talking about individuals who identify as gay. It's not like they made a decision to identify that way. And if they did make a decision, they deserve protections anyway. But nonetheless, why are we treating gay people differently from Black people, women, and any other group that's considered marginalized, vulnerable to right-wing culture war antics? Why is same-sex marriage different? Why aren't there real federal protections for same-sex marriage? Because here you have all these caveats, and I see this as a civil rights issue where gay people deserve the same type of protections that Black people do, that Asians and Latinos do, that everyone has protection against discrimination that has protections against discrimination. But let me give you some more. So the Senate also voted on an amended version of this bill because the House of Representatives had passed a far better version of this legislation previously. And so senators agreed to add language to the Senate version, ensuring that churches, universities, and other nonprofit religious organizations could not lose tax-exempt status or other benefits for refusing to recognize same-sex marriages, and could not be required to provide services for the celebration of any marriage. They also added language to make clear that the bill does not require or authorize the federal government to recognize polygamous marriages. Marriages between multiple people, polygamous, yeah. Anyway, look, I just want these politicians to explain to me why gay couples are being treated differently when it comes to potential discrimination from other groups that have federal protections against discrimination. I want to understand why they don't see this as a civil rights issue. I just want that explanation. And more importantly, since Capitol Hill wouldn't allow someone like me to be anywhere near these members of Congress or these senators to ask these questions, I want a reporter to ask. I mean, they're over there in Capitol Hill asking the same boring questions over and over again. Ask them why they see gay individuals differently from other, historically disenfranchised groups of people who currently do have federal protections, who get to enjoy certain civil rights. Why isn't this considered a civil rights issue? I'm just curious about that. But the fact that this offers some protection against what could happen with this highly conservative Supreme Court makes me feel a little bit better. I just wish the original version of this bill was the version that the Senate had voted in favor of in a bipartisan fashion. They did not. They added all these caveats. So now, in order for this legislation to pass, it needs to be sent to the House. The House needs to vote on it. And then as early as next week, it could be passed into law. And so again, there are some benefits here. I don't want to downplay it or undermine that, but there are also some flaws that I think we should have a sober look at and ask some real questions about. Because again, I do see this as a civil rights issue that deserves the same protections that other groups enjoy in this country. And no one's asking why gay couples are being treated differently. All right, well, let's move on. We've got some other news, including an update on the missile strike in Poland. What really went on here? The president of Poland says there is absolutely no evidence indicating that a missile that crashed into his country, killing 2 local farmers, was fired by Russia intentionally. In fact, he believes that it was likely a Russian-made missile that was part of Ukraine's air defense system. And that missile inadvertently, accidentally landed in Poland. However, they're still blaming Russia for the ultimate war and how it, of course, is going to lead to some of these unintended consequences. Ukraine defended itself, says the president of Poland, which is obvious and understandable, by firing missiles whose task was to knock down Russian missiles. The Russian side is to blame for this tragic event. And look, to some extent, he definitely has a point. After Russia lost territory in Ukraine, specifically Kherson, Putin started to do an increased number of missile strikes, especially in civilian territory, specifically focusing on civilian infrastructure. And this is typically what he does. So for instance, Russia fired 96 missiles at Ukrainian cities on Tuesday alone, after being forced to withdraw from the southern city of Kherson last week in a major blow for Moscow. A missile landed in a Polish village near the Ukrainian border, killing 2 farm workers. Now, following the incident and following the preliminary findings of this investigation, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky seems to reject Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky seems to reject the notion that this was a missile that was part of Ukraine's missile defense system. He thinks that that's not true. He's completely blaming Russia for this. And to be quite honest, after news broke that there had been a missile that landed in Polish territory, killing 2 people, I was impressed with how measured the United States response was to it, how careful and calculated Biden was in responding to it, because you don't want to needlessly spark World War III before you do an investigation. Zelensky, on the other hand, was a little belligerent in his remarks, and I'm gonna give you his statements and what he's currently saying in regard to this investigation in just a moment. But first, some more info regarding the the talks that occurred after this incident. So for instance, Polish officials said late Tuesday that they were considering asking NATO countries to begin special high-level consultations. Those consultations, known as Article 4 in reference to NATO's founding treaty, are a step short of invoking the alliance's mutual defense pact known as Article 5. I mean, Article 5 would mean they're going to war with Russia. So they're not asking for that. But they are considering Article 4. However, at the NATO ambassadors meeting on Wednesday, Poland chose not to ask for Article 4 consultations at this stage, a Polish NATO official said. So it doesn't appear that there's going to be any escalation from the fact that this missile landed in Poland, and that's good news. Poland summoned Russia's ambassador around midnight Tuesday for a 4-minute meeting that occurred without any exchange of courtesies or handshakes, a Polish foreign ministry spokesperson said. The government wasn't ruling out expelling the ambassador, but also had made no imminent decision to do so. I would not expel the Russian ambassador from Poland. I can understand the tensions, I can understand the fears and the worries and the anger toward Russia, namely Vladimir Putin, but you have to maintain some avenues for diplomacy. And I think expelling the ambassador kind of cuts that possibility off. And I don't think that's a good idea. Now, Ukrainian officials are now calling for NATO to declare its airspace a no-fly zone, which they've been demanding since the beginning of the war. That's also a bad idea. No-fly zone means that NATO countries are now directly at war with Russia. That means that NATO allies would be, including the United States, of course, would be shooting down Russian planes, Russian aircraft, Russian weaponry, whatever it is. And you don't want to be in a direct war with Russia. That's also not a good idea. That's also an escalation of war. And considering how Ukraine's been able to take back some of the territory from Russia, I think that it's unnecessary to do this, to needlessly escalate the war. Now, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that there was another hysterical and frenzied Russia-phobic reaction in the West following reports of the incident in Poland, which was not based on any real data. He said the government in Warsaw could have been more restrained and professional when addressing issues that could escalate a situation. But this is the interesting part. He noted what he described as the restrained and much more professional reaction of the American side and the American president. And you know what? He's right. Biden did do a good job. In fact, here he is responding to a reporter at the G20 summit.
Can you tell us what you know so far about the explosion in Poland, sir?
No, that's the Biden I like. Okay, no, I don't. I'm not going to comment on it. I don't have the details yet. I'm not going to needlessly say something that could be inaccurate, that could, inadvertently escalate the war. No, keep it simple. Keep it simple, okay? Later, when he had a few more details about what occurred, he answered some questions. This was about an hour later. Let's take a look at that.
Mr. President, it's too early to say whether this missile was fired from Russia.
There is preliminary information that contests that. I don't want to say that till we completely investigate, but it is. It's unlikely in the minds of the trajectory that it was fired from Russia.
That was a perfectly fine reaction. I mean, just waiting to see what really occurred, waiting for an investigation, using belligerent rhetoric toward Russia when you don't have all the facts yet is not a good idea. It could, again, increase tensions, it could escalate the war, more people could die as a result. And really, what we need to push toward is a peace deal. And it really does suck that on the day that Vladimir Zelensky shared his 10-point plan toward peace, meaning his openness to potential peace negotiations, this incident occurred, and hopefully that doesn't throw the possibility of peace negotiations out the window. But unfortunately, the same can't be said of Vladimir Zelensky when it comes to waiting, being patient, holding back, and not engaging in belligerent rhetoric. So he said this: hitting NATO territory with missiles, this is a Russian missile attack on collective security. This is a really significant escalation. Action is needed. Okay, he should have retracted that, number one, because it turns out that it wasn't an intentional strike by Russia. And it appears that the missile actually belonged to Ukraine and was part of Ukraine's missile defense system. Now, Zelensky denies that, he rejects that. I don't know why. I mean, why would Poland want to lie on behalf of Russia if Poland is genuinely concerned about a security risk here? It doesn't make any sense. He had also said immediately after the news of this missile incident, he also said Ukraine has long warned the war could spill across borders and added it's only a matter of time before Russian terror goes further. I can totally understand his frustration. This war has been so incredibly brutal to Ukraine, to Ukrainian civilians. It's been a complete and utter disaster. And Zelensky has fought back. He refused to flee the country. I think for the most part, he's been a pretty good leader, but he's got to put his emotions aside and be careful in what he says and what he accuses Russia of. Because again, that could also escalate the war. And this is basically a major step back after he had shared his 10-point plan toward a peace deal. And also Financial Times reporter Christopher Miller says this: Zelensky live on state TV refutes Western leaders' statements and preliminary evidence that missile, which killed 2 in Poland, was Ukrainian. I have no doubt that it was not our missile or our missile strike. We have to participate in the investigation. So he's denying it, but again, I really fail to see how Poland would benefit from lying on behalf of Russia if Russia did in fact do a missile strike in Polish territory. It doesn't really make any sense. But we'll keep an eye on the story and fill you in as we learn more. But for now, hopefully there's no indication that there's an escalation in the war in Ukraine. All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got Trump's announcement for 2024 and some of the reactions from right-wingers to his speech. Don't miss it, it's a doozy. We'll be right back.
In the caravans, I love the name, I came up with it.
Ice cream.
Welcome to our first social break of the day. Little Mac McG says, afternoon TYT fam, I just want to say that I'm furious today. I am convinced that the Democrats are excited that Donald Trump is running for president because they're idiots. Instead of indicting him like they should, they're gonna let him run thinking it will be an easy win, meaning an easy win for Democrats. And I'm highly worried they are going to lose. And as I said, I'm furious. Yeah, so we're gonna get into that a little bit in the next segment, but I think you're right to be furious if it is in fact true that Democrats are celebrating the fact that Trump is gonna run in 2024. I think underestimating him is a big mistake, not only for Democrats, but also Republicans. And I'll explain all of that in the next segment. Mickey C, the silver-haired dragon says, we all know that Republicans aren't happy with half measures. After they ban LGBT plus marriages in their states, it won't be long before they reinstate their old sodomy laws. Get married legally in another state, come back home to your red state, and it won't be long before the brown shirts will knock on your door and haul you away for sodomy. Jesus, yeah, that's not a bad point. I doubt the Senate version of the legislation addresses that. But yeah, it sounds like a bit of a loophole. It's a really interesting point. All right, we've got the throat goat dragon who says, Anna, conservatives don't think it's a civil rights issue because they think being gay is a lifestyle choice and not part of your identity as a human being. Yeah, I mean, of course conservatives think that, but why are Democrats allowing them to include all of these caveats in the legislation that treats gay marriage as if it's not a civil rights issue? That's the issue I'm having here. Little Krabby Dragon says, I love your handle, it's great. I'm enjoying my Blue Apron smoky cheddar cheese burger. I had that recently too, with a side of Salt Queen Dragon. All right, enjoy. And we have Lorraine who says, of course I'm super happy about protecting same-sex marriage and any progress/protection for the LGBTQIA+ community. Next up, abortion rights at warp speed. But Lorraine, they don't care about us. Like, 2022 was a year of confirmation for me that this country, including our politicians, including the female members of Congress, couldn't care less about us, okay? Women are seen as second-class citizens. Abortion mostly impacts women. Let's keep it real, okay? Because the men can skedaddle. Women gotta deal with the physical ramifications, the financial ramifications. Since it affects women mostly, they don't care. I'm gonna do a damn thing about it. That's the truth. All right, we've got 13 seconds, let me give you more. Yeetwood Mac in our Twitch subs says, I mean, yay, but Jesus Christ, just legalize it federally. This is stupid. Could not agree more. All right, let's get back to the show.
Ice cream.
Welcome back to TYT. Lots to get to, so why don't we get to our next story about Trump's big announcement last night.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Yes, former President Donald Trump, who lost re-election in 2020, has officially announced that he plans to run for president yet again in 2024. And while the right-wing power players, including the conservative press and Republican politicians, seem to have soured on Donald Trump following the poor performance of his candidates in the midterm elections, the real question is, how do Republican voters feel? And I really do think there's a disconnect here. And I think anyone who is underestimating Donald Trump is making a huge mistake. And I'll make my case for that in just a moment. But first, why don't we take a look at all these right-wingers who are kind of dunking on Trump today, claiming that his speech was low energy and he doesn't have a shot. Well, I should note that his daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner did not show up for the speech. They sat this one out, and it turns out that Ivanka and Jared have no interest in being involved in Donald Trump's re-election campaign. So, or I should say, second presidential campaign in 2024. Here is a video explaining where her heart's at.
Well, I spoke to several people who are close with Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, and they tell me that the couple is not going to be involved in potential Donald Trump's second run for the White House. That includes campaigning for him. That includes, should he win, and being inside the White House.
They really didn't want him to run again, but he can't help himself. He's gonna do what he does best. And for those of you who are probably thinking, well, I mean, it's hearsay. Do we really know that's what Ivanka and Jared are thinking and feeling? Oh no, they confirmed it in statements to Fox News. This time around, says Ivanka, I'm choosing to prioritize my young children and the private life we are creating as a family. I do not plan to be involved in politics. Here, I support your decision, okay? Women should be able to choose. Good for you, Ivanka. Sit this one out. Now, Rupert Murdoch is also refusing to back Trump, and the New York Post, which is under that Murdoch umbrella, of course, keeps slapping Trump down. In fact, here's their latest cover where they barely even make any mention of Trump. They certainly don't mention him by name. They focus the cover on crime, and then at the very bottom you can see Florida man makes announcement, page 26. Oh God, all right. And so what happens if you go to page 26? I was curious about it. Well, you'll find a little blurb that says, been there, done that. Love it. And then it was actually well written. I enjoyed it. They write this: with just 720 days to go before the next election, a Florida retiree made a surprise announcement Tuesday night that he was running for president. Trump kicked things off at Mar-a-Lago, his resort and classified documents library. Speaking of which, for anyone who thinks that Trump can't be investigated or indicted because of his announcement that he will run for president in 2024, you're mistaken. He could still be investigated, he could still be indicted. The question is, will Merrick Garland actually do it? And I wouldn't put any money on that. I just wouldn't. Now, there's more. The National Review, which National Review was never really a fan of Trump's, but nonetheless, they had their own piece on his announcement with a very simple headline. Let's take a look at that. No, just no. And in it, they write, the Trump administration was chaotic even on its best days because of his erratic nature and lack of seriousness. Because Republicans should be known for their seriousness. He often acted as if he were a commentator on his own presidency and issued orders on Twitter and in other off-the-cuff statements that were ignored. He repeatedly had to be talked out of disastrous ideas by his advisors and Republican elected officials. He turned on cabinet officials and aides on a dime. Trump had a limited understanding of our constitutional system, and at the end of the day, little respect for it. All right, some harsh words from the editorial board over at the National Review. But even former Trump staffers didn't have nice things to say about him following his speech. Alyssa Farah, who of course was his former communications director, said, "You try being high energy when you're running for president primarily to try to avoid indictment." Sarah Matthews, who's his former deputy press secretary, says, "This is one of the most low energy, uninspiring speeches I've ever heard from Trump. Even the crowd seems bored. Not exactly what you want when announcing a presidential run." In fact, the speech was low energy, I'll say that. He did go back to all his favorite hits. So his 2016 campaign, it kind of mirrored that, although the tone was less energetic, right? So the anti-immigration stuff, drain the swamp stuff, he leaned into all of that, and it worked for him in 2016. Will it work for him in 2024? Well, we'll wait and see about that. But what was really interesting was that during his speech, people were trying to leave, and they were blocked from doing so by security. Let's watch.
I actually saw people trying to leave, and people leaving early even before he was done. He's still speaking now, and then I think perhaps a little concerned that the hall would empty out too much. They actually started preventing people from leaving, so now they're no longer allowing people to leave.
And there is some evidence of that, because more than just a reporter speaking into a camera to tell us that that's happening. The footage that you're about to watch shows a crowd. Let's put the video up, keep the volume down. I'll explain what's happening for our audio listeners. You see a crowd gathering by the exit, but they're unable to leave because security is blocking them from leaving. They're forced to stay there to listen to the entirety of this hour-plus long speech. And we all know what Trump is like. Trump is obsessed with crowd sizes. He doesn't want to be humiliated with a wide shot of a half-empty crowd, or half the chairs empty. And so these poor people, I mean, they wanted to be there in the first place. So how poor are they, right? But no, they can't leave. They're stuck. They're stuck until the very end. Love it. All right, now let's pivot though, because we heard from the Republican establishment, right? The power players in the media, the power players within the Republican Party, meaning politicians, elected officials, they've all kind of soured on Trump. But it would be a mistake to think of them as the voice of the Republican voters, because that's where I think the disconnect really does exist. I haven't seen any indication at all that Republican voters are willing to abandon Trump for Ron DeSantis. Now, let me be clear. I've seen some polls that indicate that more Republican voters would vote for DeSantis over Trump, but I actually think that it would be dumb to put too much weight behind those polls. Okay, the polls haven't been working for us. So I'm gonna need to see more than just, oh, this one random poll shows that DeSantis is doing slightly better than Trump. And there's other stuff that's really standing out to me. For instance, while Trump certainly did get a lot of backlash during the, because of the poor performance of Republican candidates in the midterm elections, let's not forget that Trump's candidates easily won in their primaries against other Republican non-Trump candidates. Okay, so Republican voters overwhelmingly supported Trump's picks because they support Trump and his brand of republicanism. The other thing I want to kind of draw a little bit of attention to is, this video. So this is before the midterms, a little bit before the midterms. Michael Shore went to Miami specifically. Remember, Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida. So if ever you would find a place with a higher concentration of DeSantis supporters, it would be Florida, right? Well, every single person that Michael Shore spoke to liked Trump more than DeSantis. Let's watch.
Trump may have to beat Ron DeSantis in a primary to get the nomination. Who would you support, Trump versus DeSantis?
Trump. I'm Trump.
Oh, that's a tough one because I'd love either one as president, okay? And I'll tell you this, Trump's my president and DeSantis will be my next president. If Trump wins, if he runs, he'll win. If he decides not to run, he may not. DeSantis will be president. But either way, it's going to be Trump and then DeSantis.
Who would you support, DeSantis or Trump?
Right now, Trump. Yeah, Trump.
What could change that?
They run in 2014? Yeah, Trump. And then for 2028, DeSantis.
That would be a tough call, but hopefully it'll be Trump for president and DeSantis for vice president.
I hate to burst that bubble, but you can't have two people from the same state on the presidential ticket.
Oh, okay. I think I would go with Trump.
I don't follow Mr. Trump because I like Trump. I go after Trump because I like the way he does things. I don't like very much the way he talks, but I don't care about the way he talks. What I do care is where are we going with Mr. Trump? And that's the point I want to get.
The Cuban Trump supporters really need to shed the accent, which makes me find them incredibly endearing, right? Like I hear that guy and he's like a rabid Trump supporter, but I'm like, aw. Anyway, all right, let's move on. So I thought that video was telling. Obviously, that's not some scientific, study into where the hearts and minds of Republican voters happen to be at the moment. But I do think that, again, we haven't really heard much from the actual GOP voters, Republican voters. And the other thing that caught my attention today was this little video out of New York City. So let's take a look at that.
This is very disrespectful in the Arab states.
Ron has gotten too big for his britches.
He's out.
He has plenty of time to gain wisdom.
Trump or death.
Let him stay in Florida for a while.
Remember when they did the Saddam Hussein statue came down?
That's right, yes.
Remember when the Saddam statue came down? Hey. My father used to say to me, he used to say, son, I brought you into this world, I can take you out.
Everything
We're taking him out.
Everything he's got, he goes to Trump.
It's Trump or death.
Yeah. Now, those two guys are not necessarily representative of the majority of Republican voters, but I can't help but think about the low blows that Trump is very likely to use against Ron DeSantis. He's been mocking DeSantis today for bragging about what a Trump supporter he was when he was running for governor in Florida. Remember, he had a political ad where he's like talking about his love for Trump. And Trump posted that video on Truth Social today and mocked Ron DeSantis. So I don't know, I think it would be a big mistake to underestimate Trump and think that the Republican establishment is providing a voice for Republican voters. I think that there is a disconnect there. I'm very curious to see how it all plays out. But if Democrats are giddy at the thought that Trump is running in 2024 and they think that means that they'll easily win the presidential election that year, I would just warn them, don't make the same mistake you did in 2016. Just don't. All right, that does it for that story. We gotta take a quick break. When we come back though, we'll talk about the difference between COVID deaths among Democrats and Republicans and see if it made any difference at all in some of these close midterm elections.
Please sit down. I feel so guilty having you stand.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our social break. Benjamin writes in, and thank you for the super chat. Jank Anna, please look into AMC stock fraud. FTX collapse revealed that many hedge funds have shorted the stock and illegally not reported, as well as converted short position into FTX tokens to suppress demand and prevent another surge, so they never covered margin call. Please hire stock. You're understanding this? Edwin's like, whoa, okay. Please hire stock analysts to watch market. Benjamin, are you hoping that we hire you? I'm just kidding. I will look into that story. I'm very curious about it. Taylor, I see you in the doc. Look into the story. All right. Benjamin also says, First Amendment redress of grievances means lobbyists have enshrined constitutional protections to bribe is a wild take. Jonah Morton says, if I was a Republican, the last thing I would want is Trump/Biden round 2. I'd be getting behind one of the Republican governors and push Trump far right. Don't do that. I'm actually like, I think Trump has a good shot. Like, I'm in that camp. So I don't know. Again, we'll see how this all plays out. Stonks versus Stocks says, I said the same thing you said back in 2020. Being that the election was so close, it is quite possible the COVID propaganda will swing elections. Yeah, we'll see. I've got some interesting data that we'll get into in the next segment. Sir Ruin of House Roundhead says, could you call Lauren Boebert instead, or Boebert? That is pretty funny. Lauren Boebert. I would be more than fine with that. Hope she loses. By the way, if you like the name calling, I got to get his name right. I'll look into it. But there's a YouTuber I came across fairly recently who gives people all these like insulting nicknames, and his show's really fun. RM Brown, that's who it is. RM Brown. He's hilarious. All right, Joanna Morton, thank you for the comment. And Joanna Morton also says this, what we need is an Article 5 civil rights amendment to the Constitution passed by a states convention and passed by states. #end bigotry now. We need federal protections instead of all these weird carve-outs and caveats that allow red states to discriminate against gay people. Like, I'm not happy with that. That's not good with me, to say the least. Asia Starley Adams says, of course it makes sense. Poland is trying to de-escalate. They have more at risk. I guess, but I mean, why, if they provide cover for Russia, that signals to Putin that he can keep attacking and Poland will do nothing about it. You get what I'm saying? So it actually does not help them to provide cover for Russia. I don't think it would suit them in terms of their security concerns and all of that. Billy Shee Taylor says, Anna, the Q crowd on Truth Social is not happy with Trump's announcement. I sent screenshots to John, ask him about it. They're kind of over it. Yeah, we heard about it today too. They're lunatics, I don't know. Welcome back to the show. I'm Anna Kasparian. Let's get to our next story. A lot of these elections were very close, and I'm wondering how much of an impact people who died from COVID has had on these races. I'm talking about specifically the close races. Well, now we have a little more data to kind of decipher whether or not Republicans who died of COVID had an impact on some of these close midterm races. So the National Bureau of Economic Research has conducted a study titled Excess Death Rates for Republicans and Democrats During the COVID-19 Pandemic. And in it, we learned that unfortunately, there were far more Republican deaths than was necessary. In fact, because of the misinformation regarding vaccines, many Republican voters decided not to get vaccinated, and as a result, far more of them died compared to Democratic voters. In 2018, according to the study, and the early parts of 2020, excess death rates for Republicans and Democrats are similar and centered around 0. Both groups experienced a similar large spike in excess deaths in the winter of 2020 to 2021. However, in the summer of 2021, after vaccines were widely available, the Republican excess death rate rose to nearly double that of Democrats. And this gap widened further in the winter of 2021. So some person on Twitter tweeted to me to say, yeah, well, I mean, maybe there are more Republicans that died because they didn't get vaccinated, but pretty soon there's gonna be a lot more Democrat deaths because of the vaccine. Except, no, that's not gonna happen. And it actually pains me. I don't feel good about the fact that there were people in this country, our fellow Americans, who were intentionally misled, and they died as a result of that. It makes me sick to my stomach. But let me continue with this study. This gap widened further in 2021, according to the study's authors. This rose to a 153%. Let's go to the number 2, please. So this gap widened further in the winter of 2021. The study said this rose to 153% to a 153% difference after all adults could take the vaccine in Florida and Ohio. And the gap in excess death rates between Republicans and Democrats is concentrated in counties with low vaccination rates, if that wasn't clear already. Jason Schwartz, who's one of the authors of this study and also teaches at Yale, says if Republicans are dying in increased numbers relative to their Democratic colleagues in a political climate where there are so many close electoral contests, could that have been the decider in a particular race? Our study can't answer that, but it certainly seems plausible given just how stark the differences in vaccination rates have been among Democrats and Republicans. So to be clear, their study did not analyze how much of a difference this made in close races. But I do want to kind of turn to something that caught my attention. So First, there are some limitations to this study. Because of the data available, they mostly focused on Ohio and Florida. Okay, and Ohio and Florida might not be representative of all these other states. So that's a limitation to the study that you should be aware of. But nonetheless, I mean, when you think about it, let's go to Arizona, okay? The gubernatorial race in Arizona between Republican Trump pick, Carrie Lake, and the Secretary of State and Democratic candidate Katie Hobbs. Hobbs won, but she didn't win by much, okay? So that's the outcome of that gubernatorial race in Arizona. It's a difference of about 17,209 votes. There's been a total of 31,613 COVID deaths in Arizona. So could that have had an impact? Maybe, I don't know for sure. And obviously, not all of those deaths are attributed to Democratic voters or Republican voters. We don't know the breakdown in political identity. We do know that more Republicans unfortunately died because of the misinformation they were fed by vaccine deniers and such. But I mean, could that have made a difference in Arizona? Maybe. And maybe it's a bad idea to, discourage your base to protect themselves in the middle of a pandemic when you're gonna need their support. And I don't know if Republican politicians namely, or members of the media have really learned anything from that. I mean, and also like the whole focus of this conversation is pretty crude and terrible, right? Because you shouldn't want anyone to needlessly die. Like that should be the #1 driver and motivation for the Republican Party. What can we do to protect as many people, regardless of their political affiliation, protect as many people as possible so they don't have to die early, so they can live long, thriving lives? No, but instead, for some reason, they thought it would be, politically beneficial to share misinformation with their own voters and supporters, knowing full well that they were lying about the vaccines and its efficacy. And twice as many Republicans, according to this study, died compared to Democrats. Incredible. It really is incredible stuff. So I'm sure there's gonna be even more analysis on this, even more studies, but a lot of these races were super close, and honestly, the number of COVID deaths could have made some difference. Again, we don't know for sure, but it's just something to keep in mind. All right, let's move on to how women are used as pawns by the Republican Party.
You can't really blame the Republicans in Congress or Kevin McCarthy because they didn't do the Roe v. Wade reversal. That was the Supreme Court. So it would have been far better off if that hadn't happened.
Well, I'm glad that everyone's admitting that now.
It was a little bit inconvenient for the Republican Party to have a Supreme Court do something they've been goading the Supreme Court to do for, about 50 years. Because it turns out that what they wanted was incredibly unpopular and it could have hurt them in the midterms. And it probably did hurt them in the midterms. The thing about rights is once people have them and get to enjoy them, they get real salty when those rights are taken away from them. So the reversal of Roe v. Wade was the first time the Supreme Court had snatched rights away from the American people that had previously been granted to the American people by the same Supreme Court, okay, by the same part of the judiciary. It is incredible that they did not see this coming. So, man, it didn't work out for Republicans in the midterms. Gee, it was gonna be a red wave, except what have they offered people? What is their alternative to Democratic leadership? We're gonna take your rights away. We're gonna investigate parents if they make a decision about the health care they wanna provide to their children who come out as transgender. We're not gonna really talk about the economy other than complain about inflation without offering any real solutions to combat it. That's what the Republican Party did in the midterms. And so, yeah, do I think taking rights away, abortion rights, reproductive rights away from the American people was unpopular and hurt them during the midterms? Absolutely. But it was one of many factors. Let's not get it twisted. What's sick about this whole thing, though, is that everything they do, constantly weighing in on culture war narratives, it's all meant to be a distraction from the real robbery that takes place, right? They love to help their corporate donors rob all of us. That's what they do. But they need something to run on, so they run on culture war narratives. We're going to outlaw abortion. We're going to outlaw this. We're going to make sure government gets involved in the most intimate elements of your life. And they're shocked that it turns out that no, Americans don't want big government when it comes to social issues, when it comes to our personal lives, when it comes to things that might make us happy but have absolutely no negative impact on anyone else. Government shouldn't be involved in that. Government, though, should be big when it comes to, regulating some of these corporations, namely the corporations that have been penalized as of late for breaking child labor laws. We just did a story yesterday about a slaughterhouse that was employing children as young as 13 years old, assigning them to overnight shifts. Yeah, I want big government when it comes to doing something about that. But Republicans certainly don't. What's also interesting is how the reversal of Roe has impacted the personal lives of very young people in this country when it comes to dating, when it comes to intimacy. There's a lot of fear, and for good reason. So the latest Singles in America survey, which is an annual study of 5,000 single people in the country conducted by Match, found that 78% of singles of reproductive age said that the overturning of Roe has in fact changed their sex life. So let's get into some specifics. In fact, 25% overall and 28% of Gen Z say that they'll use or ask their partners to use condoms more often, which I don't have a problem with. I think that's a good thing. Even though they really need to get the condom game, revamped. Like, really, you guys can't figure out how to make a condom that doesn't feel terrible? Like, figure it out. Okay, it's time. Nonetheless, let's move on. There are other results of this survey that I think are telling. So 20% overall, or 27% of Gen Z are more hesitant to have sex. 20% overall, 27% of Gen Z are more afraid of getting pregnant or getting someone pregnant, as they should be. And 13% said that SCOTUS, meaning the Supreme Court decision, made them more hesitant to date. And when you have statistics indicating that over the last several years, intimacy among young people has really taken a big dive. You have fewer men, young men, in meaningful, intimate relationships, which is also not a good thing. This is not a positive development in our country. People should not be living in fear when it comes to their personal lives, their dating lives, and whether they get intimate with a partner. But this is what they're having to deal with now, because if you're one of the unlucky individuals who lives in a red state that has effectively banned abortion, and you don't have the resources to travel out of state to have your needs met, well, you're screwed. And there's also no social safety net or support system to catch you if you fall economically, financially. So yeah, didn't work out so well for Republicans. What a shocker that this was an incredibly unpopular thing to push for and succeed in accomplishing. Wow, who could have seen that coming? Greg Gutfeld maybe would have some redeeming qualities if his comedy made up for his stupidity, but it doesn't, so no redeeming qualities for Greg Gutfeld. Yet he's still employed at Fox News and I'm sure makes a ton of money spewing his moronic takes. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back for the second hour of the show, we'll talk about a big strike that's taking place in California right now among academic workers in the UC system. And we'll also discuss some big changes afoot for Twitter. Come right back.
Ice cream.
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries, because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he was the original Bernie Sanders. If you wanna know how we're gonna win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country, so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Elon. Ice cream. Elon.
Ice cream.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian, John Iadarola with you. How you doing, John?
I'm good. The news has been consistently pretty good for like 8 days now. It's weird.
Yeah.
I don't want to jinx it or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if you jinx it or not, because believe me, the bad news will come.
It will.
It will come.
Even just during the break, I don't know if you had time to mention it, but the LA mayoral race was called. Karen Bass has apparently won.
Karen Bass is the new mayor of Los Angeles. I hope, much like in Brazil, with Bolsonaro so depressed that he's effectively allowed, Lula to lead 2 months early. I hope that's the case in Los Angeles. I hope Garcetti steps aside. Oh wait, too late. He already has.
Yeah.
Stepped aside like 2 years ago.
In anticipation, yeah, I don't think he's been here. He has less of a connection to LA than Oz does to Pennsylvania.
That guy, man, he has been out for literally years at this point.
Politicians love getting the position and then hate having to do literally anything involved in it.
I know.
Yeah.
Now, Garcetti might be one of the worst mayors in Los Angeles history, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, it seems like everyone agrees, regardless of political affiliation in Los Angeles County, right? It's not a Democrat versus Republican thing. It's a, wow, Eric Garcetti has completely abandoned his post thing, yeah. Anyway, so update on Los Angeles, but we also have some updates on workers striking in California, and I think this is an important story. I'm glad that I didn't get to this in the first hour because I know you've had some experience as an academic worker.
Something like it.
So let's discuss. Let's get to the story.
In the chemistry department, I make about 37,000, 38,000. I get paid for 20 hours of work a week, but really we're all full-time employees here. I don't have a second job. I'm not allowed to have a second job.
So my appointment is for 20 hours a week. I make, pre-tax about $40,000 a year. But in reality, I'm usually working 40, usually more hours per week, right? Because there's so much that needs to be done. What it means is that I'm rent burdened, just like, pretty much all of my colleagues out here right now. That means we're paying more than 30% of our wages towards rent and utilities each month. And the tensions pretty much boil down to the fact that the university has committed a huge number of unfair labor practices at the bargaining table.
You just heard from academic workers within the UC, meaning the University of California system. And this is a historic strike, to say the least, the largest strike of UC workers in history. And I love the fact that they're speaking out because, as you can imagine, it's incredibly expensive to live in a state like California. And when you are an academic worker, meaning you have the credentials to teach, okay? You're literally doing the heavy lifting to teach at a university level, but you're not tenured and you're not making enough money to just live and have your basic needs met. And that's what they're striking about. 48,000 University of California academic workers, including postdoctoral scholars, graduate teaching assistants and researchers walked off the job this week in a strike billed as the largest at any academic institution in history. I saw some right-wing commentary about this strike, and the argument is, well, I mean, if you make the decision to get a worthless degree, what do you expect? Except the degree isn't worthless because they're literally doing the heavy lifting in these classes by instructing the university students on whatever their majors are, right? Whatever class they're taking within their major.
Yeah.
John.
Yeah, I don't care what the right wing thinks about literally any strike, especially this one. Oh, I'm shocked. They don't care about people who work at universities being abused. First of all, of course they're not gonna care. It's workers and they despise workers. They're not interested in workers. But particularly people whose entire job is the pursuit or dissemination of information, not interested in any of that. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be. There are plenty of fields in academia that have a right-wing slant at the very least, but they've been trained. It's propaganda. They've been trained to think that universities are, for some reason, inherently left-wing, which is simply not the case historically or in the modern era. And so they're not gonna support this. So let's set them aside. Who the hell cares? Yeah, it's historic. It's absolutely massive. Hard to imagine how they don't succeed so long as they can, maintain solidarity. Just the sheer number, like the system can't afford, like they can't replace nearly 50,000 workers. That's simply too much. It's a demonstration of how scale can be so significant in one of these efforts. In the video that was put together, which I guess it was Washington Post interviews. So hey, credit to the Washington Post. They're actually going and interviewing the workers. That's awesome. It looked like a video that would have been put together like by More Perfect Union or something.
No, it was a great video, to be fair. And while the national press hasn't really covered this story much, with the exception of the Washington Post, I've had to rely on local reporting on the matter. There has been some journalism around this, but I think there should be a lot more, especially when you consider the sheer volume of workers that are striking right now in California, 48,000 to be exact. Let me give you some more details because I want you to know about what they're asking for and what they've already rejected from the UC system in terms of pay raises. This one comment from Safa Hamze, who's a teaching assistant and international doctoral student, just it gives the whole game away. And when I say that, I'm referring to how you actually accomplish political goals, okay? This is the strongest tool we have against the administration. When we are striking, we're not grading, we're not attending sections, we're not attending lectures, we're not holding office hours. When that happens, the entire education progress stops. When we strike, you can see that we do most of the work because all of the work stops. So obviously this makes a lot of sense in this context, but it also makes a lot of sense in any other context. The reason why having like an organized workforce is a good thing is because if you do decide to strike, and if you do have that union protection and they have a strike fund to make you whole while you're striking, well, it first of all informs everyone of just how valuable you are as the worker, as the person in most cases generating the revenue necessary for the company. In this case, they're generating, the instruction, the education that these students are paying for. Without them, these classes can't go on, right? And a lot of the tenured professors are pressured to do research. Like, you gotta do research, you gotta publish, you gotta publish, you gotta publish. And so they do focus most of their energy there. And that's why when it comes to the heavy lifting inside the classroom, it's usually these non-tenured academic employees who are doing it, who are doing the hard work. By the way, real quick, just to give you the details on what they're asking for. Surveys by the UAW found that 92% of graduate workers and 61% of postdoctoral scholars were rent burdened. They want to see all graduate student workers who are teaching assistants and tutors earn a base salary of $54,000, more than double these workers' average current pay of just $24,000 according to the union. That is insane, by the way. We're talking about California, guys. And to be clear, even 45,
I don't know how it's possible.
How do you live on $45,000 in California?
Well, and that's why the thing that stuck out to me the most in the video, and I don't know to what extent it's true for different sorts of workers or whatever, but at least one of the people being interviewed said they're not legally allowed to have a second job.
Yeah, they're not.
I don't know how that's tenable.
Insane.
When I was a lecturer and TA and tutor and I ran an experimental lab and all that stuff, I waited tables, which is its own issue. I should not have had to do that to survive. It definitely held me back in my ability to do well in the academic environment, but at least I could do it and supplement my salary that way. Like crushing people between low pay, ever increasing rent, let alone they're not gonna be able to buy, obviously, but even the rent is increasing, and then not allowing them to work hard on the side to make it work.
It's insane, why?
That's just crazy, that seems like a layup, but.
Makes no sense. It really, it's terrible. But I agree with you. I mean, they shouldn't even have to look for a side hustle or a second job just to make ends meet. And even with the pay that they're asking for, the base salary that they're asking for, they would still need a second job to make ends meet. I can't emphasize enough how astronomically expensive it is to live in California. The housing is crazy. I mean, it depends on where you're living, but in most parts of California, there is no real public transportation. There is some in the Bay Area. The BART system is decent, but if you're in Los Angeles,
LA's trying to get some off the ground, but it's not great.
You need a car. Okay, you need to pay for the insurance, you need to make the car payments, you need gas. You can't survive even on the base salary they're demanding.
You probably want to eat food occasionally too.
Right, that could help. You might need that sustenance to be able to think when you're instructing students.
Yeah, and by the way, if I could add to, as you said, and as has been described by some of those people there, again, the UC system might be different in some ways, but so they obviously do the grading, proctoring exams and things like that. Literally you cannot maintain a class without those things. But bear in mind, a lot of these workers will also guest lecture when the professor can't be there. And then even outside of they're holding office hours and tutoring sessions and all that. But outside of the academic part, on the research part, which also brings in a lot of money, they do that too. Like a lot of the professors are not running these studies individually. They're not doing all the research individually. I and other graduate workers were doing that. They do plenty of work and it wouldn't be possible without the professors too. And by the way, they should be paid well. But every part of this will lock up without them. And by the way, not only can they not afford to let this maintain because then students will drop out so they lose the tuition money, but what about their accreditation, the reputation of the school? Can they go a semester or two without terrible damage being done to their reputation?
No, what stood out to me about how the UC system, and I'm sure other university systems are the same way, but nonetheless, the way the UC system is carrying out their treatment of workers reminds me a lot of Walmart. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Walmart is notorious for paying their full-time workers so little that the government has to subsidize Walmart by paying like social safety net benefits to their workers who literally work full-time but still don't make enough money to be able to make ends meet. Same thing is happening in this UC system, okay, where their academic employees who are probably also drowning in student loan debt. Let's not forget that part of it. They're having to rely on California programs like CalFresh. CalFresh is the statewide, food stamp program. So why are we as California taxpayers subsidizing the bad behavior and the poor treatment of the UC system toward its workers? Like, why? Why are we? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's pretty sick that we're subsidizing this. And so I don't want academic employees to have to rely on government aid. I have no problem with government aid. I think I'm pretty clear about that. I'm 100% supportive of the social safety net. I want it to be far more robust. But the fact that workers, especially like academic workers who are doing the heavy lifting in the classroom, the fact that they have to rely on government programs to make ends meet is sick. And then you also consider how much they're bringing in, the UC system is bringing in through tuition, and how much they're paying their chancellors. Okay, so let's, a lot of money, final point on that. Let's go to graphic 8. The chancellors of the University of California's 9 undergraduate campuses each got raises. They each got raises, John, okay? Under the action taken by the university's Board of Regents in January. The raises would range from about 6% to 28%. After the raises, the salaries of the chancellors would range from about, just $522,000 to $640,000.
Well, they're probably teaching a lot of classes, I assume. Probably grinding it out, grading papers and stuff. Like political positions.
What's interesting is the university system has defended the pay raises for the chancellors by arguing, look, we need to be competitive so we can draw in the best talent. But wait, you don't feel that way when it comes to the actual educators? The people who do the heavy lifting within the classrooms? You don't think you need to find the best and the brightest? And have like competitive salaries to attract the best and the brightest? Nah, it's sick. The whole thing is sick. So solidarity with these striking workers. I really, really hope they get more than what they're asking for. Because even what they're asking for here, I don't know how they would make ends meet on $54,000 if they're like living in the Bay Area, right? If they're at Berkeley.
And a lot of them make a lot less than that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we have to unfortunately take a break, which is the bane of my existence. But nonetheless, let's do that. And when we come back, we've got some more news for you.
Ice cream.
Welcome back to our social break. Starlight says, Anna, do you know who will profit off the continuation of the Ukraine/Russian war? Almost as important, your hair looked effortless, or looks effortless. Thank you. It wasn't effortless. I had to wash it today.
Takes a lot of effort to look that effortless. I should know.
But yeah, I mean, obviously there. Wait, what?
Never mind.
Okay.
Stupid joke.
We all know who makes money off war, and it's the weapons contractors and private defense contractors and all of that. But there was a comment about your hair, John, that I wanted to look for. Here we go. Matthew, the pale Turk, writes in and says, John, you have perfect hair. Stay beautiful.
Is it beautiful hair?
He
had beautiful hair. How? How does he do it?
Bart's ready, man.
He's a wizard on that thing. But thank you.
If he gets the call, he's got his finger on the button. He's ready.
Because I'm a professional.
Look it up in the book. Thank you very much. That's very nice of you. It's not totally accurate, but thank you.
Daytime Dragon says, Jank, who isn't here, but that's okay. I loved your interview today. So I'm guessing that's the Larry Elder interview.
Yeah.
I wish you had been able to get Elder to understand corporations must maximize profits, so the government must regulate corporations to protect citizens and the world from greed. Elder knows that.
Yeah.
His whole, his political, ideology doesn't want to protect Americans from corporate greed. All right, let's go to Warren McNeil, who says, I believe Donald Trump will not win the Republican nomination based on how election denier candidates fared in the midterms, big donors dropping him, and how right-wing media is turning on him. Well, okay, but again, there's a difference between the general election and the primaries. And so what I'm referring to is where Republican voters are at right now. And I'm not buying that they've abandoned Trump the same way Republican lawmakers and conservative media has jumped ship.
Yeah.
Now, in the general election, who knows what could happen if Trump ends up being the nominee? Okay, you had something to say.
Yeah, and right-wing media can only reject him until it becomes too costly among the right-wing base to do so. So it's all gonna come down to the base on both sides, political and media.
It's all about the base,
That's a song.
It is a song. All right, we got one more. Evan says, Cenk must bring back the loser Donald segment. I totally disagree. I think that's a really bad idea. That did not work out. Okay, let's get back to the show. What up? Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian, John Iadarola with you. Let's talk about housing, shall we? Let's talk about housing.
Let's get saucy with some housing.
Well, you know that politicians are really failing their own constituents when those same constituents need to rely on corporations like Disneyland and Disney World to create affordable housing. And that's what's currently transpiring in the great state of Florida, which of course I wish people would stop referring to as a purple state, because it is not a purple state, it is a red state.
Yep.
Let's be clear on that. Yep. Now, Disney is planning to donate 80 acres of land in Orlando, Florida for the project to build affordable housing for its employees, okay? So, and look, this has been a problem all across the country where people cannot afford to live in the same area that their place of work is at, okay? That's certainly true in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, you see it everywhere, right? And obviously we're seeing it in Orlando as well. And so Disney thought, maybe we need to step in because we need workers. And if they can't afford to live here, that's gonna be a problem. The Michaels organization will build, own, and operate the 1,300 unit development meant to ease the housing market for service workers in Metro Orlando. The units will be available to qualified applicants who are Disney employees or members of the public. So everyone.
Yeah, well, I guess there are some other qualifications baked into qualified, but it's like, well, if you're an employee or if you're not an employee.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm assuming there are other qualifications.
Yeah. Now, let's get to some more details. The development is about 15 minutes away from Disney World, which is great. Banger, love that. The project was announced in April of this year, but Disney just announced their collaboration with the Michaels organization today. So that's why it's getting a little more attention. Now, sadly, the project may be a little more than a you-know-what measuring contest, because there have been other companies, competitors to Disney specifically, that have done something similar earlier, including Universal, which announced its affordable housing plans in March of this year. So, but whatever, I don't even care. If this is the kind of you-know-what measuring contest that corporations got involved in, more of it, please, please, please keep measuring, okay? Because if we have to, like, it's sick that we have to rely on corporations in this case to build affordable housing, but they're not doing it out of the kindness of their own hearts. They're doing it because it's gonna benefit them. And they want people to like get off their backs about, the employees not being paid enough to live in the communities they're working in.
Yeah, I think
maybe you could pay them more. I don't know, but whatever.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Seems like that'd be cheaper in the long run.
But you know what? We do need more affordable housing, because look, think about it this way. More affordable housing, even if only Disney employees can take advantage of that affordable housing, still increases the inventory of housing overall, and that could lower rent possibly in other cases as well. We'll see.
Yeah, no, we obviously need a massive influx. 1,300, that's drop in the bucket nationally, but for that area, for their employees, probably quite a bit. I don't know how many total employees they have. I assume in that area probably still a lot, but this will help. I don't love it though, not only because it signals that, as you said, we can't rely on the state or federal government to do a better job of this, but also I don't like the idea of like corporate towns coming back and stuff like that. And I know that Disney already kind of has a version of that.
Disney is definitely already a corporate town.
Yeah, look, Universal is doing it too. I know that a company like Tesla will move into an area and create like a whole area of its own. I don't love the historic, like the stuff that's happened in examples of this in the past. So we'll see. I mean, it would be possible that they could set up a thing like this, and if there were the right sort of regulations, either state or federal regulations, that it could just be housing. We'll see if that's what ends up happening. Obviously, Florida's governor has had a pretty adversarial relationship with Disney. I don't know how that affects the housing thing potentially. Well, maybe they're doing the right thing. I don't know. I don't love the idea that they would need to get involved in this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But I just think in this case, corporations have more of a vested interest in building the affordable housing as opposed to our politicians.
Yeah.
Which again is gross. Because I mean, look, but that's the other thing. And I don't mean to blame voters, but I do think that people need to be more disciplined in not getting distracted with non-issues that Republicans try to distract them with, right?
In Florida.
In places like Florida, certainly. What are they doing to make your life better? I get that some voters really get a rise off of making other people's lives miserable. Great, I mean, if you're into that, fine. But can the second part of it at least be, hey, let me ask myself, my preferred candidate or the Republican Party that I love so much, what have they done to make my life better? What have they done to make my financial situation more stable? Or my economic opportunities more plentiful? Like, what have they done? And if the answer is not much, consider your priorities a little bit, reconsider. And by the way, I have a lot of critique for the Democratic Party, which has now also been completely captured by corporate interests. And they engage in their distractions as well. Not all of them, and not to the same extent as Republicans, but I don't see a lot of Democrats really fighting hard to build more affordable housing.
Well, I mean, I guess devil's advocate, at the very least, they did pass the infrastructure bills, which, as we pointed out along the way, that's a lot of it is give out handouts to corporations. Some of it is to build affordable housing, and at the very least, under Democrats, HUD can function. They don't put someone who's literally intended to stop it in charge of HUD. So, but again, I think I would love for more and more Republicans to think seriously about the consequences to their life, based on who's going to be in office. But like when I think about, like I compare you to like a stereotypical, like Biden's a great Democrat sort of person. They have a much higher opinion of how likely it is that good things will happen under Biden. We would say an unrealistically high. But then there's people who can be on the opposite side of you, and I think there's a lot of Republicans that whether they would admit it consciously or not, they have no belief that anything positive will happen economically for them coming out of any administration. And so if the only thing you can get is screw them trans athletes or something, I think that they're ready to make that bargain.
Jesus Christ. By the way, the whole thing about like, oh, we love people like Trump because they really own the libs and make the libs upset. I don't know. I mean, I don't speak for everyone on the left, broadly speaking, the left, but like I feel so dead inside right now that almost nothing bothers me. So like, I know you guys really want to own me, but like,
you're unownable.
You can't. I'm unownable. Like nothing shocks me. Nothing disturbs me anymore. Like it's all been taken out of my soul. It's gone. Anyway, but I do want to just note that in Florida, much like other states, housing has become increasingly unaffordable, and Ron DeSantis might have something to do with that. Let's watch.
Governor Ron DeSantis has raised millions from the real estate industry, one of his biggest donor groups. Over the past 20 years, the Republican-held legislature has shifted $2.3 billion from the Sadowski Affordable Housing Act Fund, a housing rental assistance program for low-income families, to their other legislative priorities. In April, they raided $100 million from the fund to reward luxury developers.
Of course. Luxury developers, they've really done great things in this country by increasing the homeless population in the United States of America. Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, I would love to have Michael Schor go down to the villages or something, although they're probably doing pretty well, but find some Floridians who are not doing as well and ask them about this. I bet that they would refuse to actually think seriously about it, but they also believe that someday they will eventually live in one of those luxury developments. We know that the way they think about tax rates is based on a fantasy land version of what their own tax rates will someday be. That should be game over for a politician like Ron DeSantis, but it should be. Well, you would need the press to do its job in actually informing people about what's really transpiring with these politicians. But unfortunately, they don't get a lot of that unless they're watching the Young Turks. All right. Well, if you are having a little difficulty paying for housing, don't worry, because Jeff Bezos has some advice for you.
We are in some tough economic times. Some people say that perhaps we're already in a recession. What is your advice for small business owners?
The economy does not look great right now. Things are slowing down. You're seeing layoffs in many sectors of the economy. People are slowing down. So my advice to people, whether they're small business owners or is take some risk off the table. If you were going to make a purchase, maybe slow down that purchase a little bit.
Yes, the former CEO of Amazon, a billionaire who was so vicious to his own warehouse workers that they'd have to pee in bottles and in some cases defecate in plastic bags. He has some advice on what to do during an economic downturn that of course would have no negative impact on him, but a huge negative impact on people who are already suffering from working in places that were led by people like him. So why are we getting economic advice or financial advice from Jeff Bezos? I get that he's a billionaire.
Because he's a billionaire, so he's better and smarter and harder working and more handsome than us. Were you not raised in America? Do you not get how this works? They're all better, and we, the lowly peasants, should be willing to jump in front of bullets for them on Twitter, if not in the real world. Look, I'm almost less bothered by the fact that they would go to him for advice for regular people. Although in her defense, she framed it as being about small business owners. Although what he would know about the struggles of small business owners, I don't know. But
no, but he weighs in on what ordinary people should do.
No, and that's why he deserves more of the discredit. But then his advice, because remember, he's a billionaire, so he's a genius, is don't buy expensive stuff.
No,
don't buy a big TV because it's gonna cost money and then you won't have that money. That's a great point. Thank you, Jeff.
Here's the actual
That's
headline.
the best he can do.
No, I know. Okay, so just.
Should I make more money too? Or no, that'll probably distract me from the not buying expensive stuff. I should focus on that.
Amazon announced this week that they are laying off 10,000 workers as we enter the holiday season. So I'm sure they're really jazzed about that. And after, Amazon made, of course, record profits during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I do want to go to the CNN Business headline for this story, where they write, Jeff Bezos' top tips for managing the economic downturn. Oh my God, tell me more. What does he say? So in the interview, Bezos urged people, to your point, John, to put off expenditures for big ticket items, such as new cars, televisions, and appliances, noting that delaying big purchases is the surest way to keep some dry powder in the event of a prolonged economic downturn. People be buying washing machines, and that's what the real problem with the economy is. People be buying drying machines.
I think we could save a lot of money on food by consuming Jeff Bezos. That's what I think.
All right,
I think there's some great calories in these billionaires.
I didn't know
and
John
they need
was
to be
into that.
consumed.
I reject it. I'm not interested.
I'm just
Okay,
like
I'd rather starve to death.
We had a little disagreement on the show, Cenk and I, about the inherent evil of being a billionaire. And when I see stuff like that, it's not just that they're evil, it's that they can't just go be evil on their private islands. They have to come and just spit in our face with it.
Yes, that is such a great point.
When the reporter was like, we're going through some hard times, and he's like, shut up. What the hell do you know about it? Honestly, he said, avoid big purchases because there might be tough times.
Look at his face.
I liked Rings of Power. They spent, what, $750 million on it, and now they have to fire tens of thousands of employees. Maybe if you'd taken some of your top tips and not invested so much in a big purchase like Rings of Power, maybe you wouldn't have had to sack more employees than ever before in the history of Amazon at a time when people are still using Amazon at amazing rates. Maybe he should be taking his own advice before rolling it out on CNN.
Bezos said the probability.
Don't cancel the show though, I like it.
Oh, it's a show. I was like, I don't know what that is. Okay, Bezos said, no, I do know. It's the Game of Thrones TV series.
No, it's the Lord of the Rings TV. That's the one with
Wait,
Gollum.
what did I just say?
Game of Thrones.
Oh, sorry, I meant to say Lord of the Rings. Sorry, I misspoke. Okay, anyway.
We're friends again.
Let's move on. Bezos said the probability of economic conditions worsening makes it prudent, everybody, to save some cash if it's an option.
He literally said to save money.
Take some risk off the table, he said.
Oh my God, I should probably put out the fire I started on all my cash. I thought you get rid of it in a downturn.
But that is the problem, John.
What have I done?
We all know it. We both know it. Like, that's the problem with people like us. We love to put the risk on the table, okay? My dinner table, full of risk. Risk everywhere.
The way I eat it kind of is actually. A risk of diabetes, if not recession.
Just a little bit of risk reduction could make a big difference, he says. By the way, the whole thing about like don't buy a car. So look, this is a side note. I do think that Americans are a little too obsessed with like every 2 years I need a new car, Like you guys need to get over that, okay? No one cares about your car. If you're a car fanatic and it really, really makes you happy, fine. But
fine, JR, fine.
Yeah, but like that's the thing with JR. JR doesn't buy fancy cars.
That's true, he likes the classic cars.
Yeah.
He likes fixing them up anyway, but yeah.
But like.
Used cars are super expensive right now. It's tough to buy transportation no matter when you buy it.
They are very expensive. I'm a big proponent of used cars. I have a used car, it's great. I bought it before the pandemic, but nonetheless, but putting that aside. But like, he does realize that people, in a lot of cases, might just need a new car. Right? Like if their car breaks down, they need transportation to get to work. That's not just some like big luxurious buy. It's something you literally need to get to and from work, especially in some places where public transportation isn't really an option. So like, it's just really interesting to see a fabulously wealthy individual try to decipher what the lifestyle of everyone else is like.
Yeah.
That's what kind of stands out to me in the, like the whole thing about like don't buy appliances. I don't know, maybe there are Americans out there who are like, these appliances in my kitchen, like they work really well, but I'm just kind of sick of them. So I think I'm just gonna like revamp and buy a bunch of new appliances. Like, Most of the time, people don't do that. They buy appliances because they need to replace one that's not working anymore. You know, which by the way, it's looming. My washer dryer, it's looming, right?
Yeah.
But I got to keep my powder dry, according to Jeff Bezos.
Just call it money. Why'd you have
I
to
already
call it
have too
dry
much
powder?
risk in my dinner table. So
it is amazing that we tolerate their existence, let alone their public existence.
no, but John, I would have said that same thing maybe 5 years ago, maybe even a year ago. But the unionization efforts that we're seeing, the strikes that we're seeing, things are starting to change. And I don't want to overstate it, right? I'd like to see even more momentum on that front, but I don't think a lot of workers are putting up with it anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, that I think is more focused on making sure that they have what they need. And I'm sure most of them would support higher taxes and all that too. So, credit to them. But what, can we start talking about a wealth tax again? Like, I feel like there was some momentum going a couple of years ago. Could we make sure that in 2024, that's a big part of the conversation? There should be fewer billionaires than they are. That should be a policy and social goal for America. Okay, we do not need more people like Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos would be perfectly fine if he had $25 million, okay?
He's such a dope financial advisor, everybody. Okay, he really he really understands us. Real final graphic I'm gonna read to you because I think this tells it all. And he is so in the dark about this reality. Let's go to graphic 6. According to the 2022 Personal Capital Wealth and Wellness Index, only 43% of Americans are in a position to handle an unforeseen $500 expense without worry. By the way, household debt has exploded.
Sure.
And it's because an increasing number of Americans, they're just not making enough money to make ends meet and they're putting it on their credit cards, whatever they need.
Well, yeah, and it's not surprising. They're going through 8, 9, 10 microwaves a year just because they get bored with it and they want new appliances. Stop going through your fridges, people. These needless purchases of new wine coolers and dishwashers, it needs to end.
All right, guys, we're gonna take our final break of the show. When we come back though, some big changes ahead over at Twitter, and it's probably because Elon Musk is not having a good time. We'll be right back.
Ice cream.
Welcome back to our social break. So I'm gonna go to our YouTube members because one comment in particular really caught my attention. Hot Pot Biddy Dragon says, babies are an accident sometimes. You just haven't experienced it. Coming from an adopted mom who was born from a 12-year-old or of a 12-year-old. Yeah, I don't want to live in a society that forces the 12-year-old to have a baby. And like, look, I get that that was your mom, but
well, and it can be a choice.
It should be a choice.
But it should be a choice.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Deanna Atkinson says we need better housing everywhere. What's that mug John is drinking from? I like that you guys are pivoting sharply in the middle of your comments.
No problem.
Yeah.
Made by a member of the audience. Got a nice little dragon wrapped around it, a little crown with the dragon daddy on there. It's amazing. I love it.
The no step on Snick sticker that was sent to me is one of my prized possessions, and it is currently hanging on my refrigerator, and I laugh at it every time I see it.
Nice, nice.
All right, let's go to Matthew the Pale Turk, who says, Jank Utopian and Anna Kick Asperian. I love you guys so much, so I changed my handle. No more bizarre, unwieldy permutations of fart and poop. I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, okay, Chris Stiles, thank you for the super chat, we appreciate it. Built to Help says, sent this yesterday but missed the end of the show. Elon, Ye, Trump, Carrie Lake, and the rest of the Republicans should go to Mars and give it a go. We'll clean up Earth and stay here, thanks. By the way.
Oh, I gotta write that short story.
Did you see Shaq's wild statement about how he thinks there's actually more than one moon?
Like that Earth has more than one moon?
No, just that there are more than one. There's more than one moon, and I think like the universe.
Well, yeah, there's more than one moon.
No, I know.
No, I gotta find out what this is.
But like the good news is Shaq is now qualified to be a Republican candidate for the Senate. So it's great.
Okay, I gotta find this thing.
All right, let's go to, we got 40 seconds left. I wanna give our Twitch community some love. And our YouTube members too, geez, there's so many comments. All right, Dave Schmidt, thank you for gifting 2 subs. My dog would do a better job, resubbed with Prime for 18 months. Election day, I voted Dem across the board hours after my, oh my God, hours after my dog died.
Oh no.
4 days later, I ended up sick. My county is solidly red with a 2-to-1 ratio. Thank you NYC for keeping New York Dem. By the way, Anna's sandbag comment in the bonus episode, and then there was a skull emoji. That was a good one, wasn't it? Good callback to 40-year-old virgin. All right, we gotta get back to the show.
It feels like a bag of sand. It feels like a bag of sand.
Welcome back to the show. Anna and John with you. Let's get to our next story.
What you think about Trump's big announcement and some of the less than flattering comments he has made about you?
Well, you know, one of the things I've learned in this job is when you're leading, when you're getting things done, yeah, you take incoming fire. At the end of the day, I would just tell people to go check out the scoreboard from last Tuesday night. The fact of the matter is, the fact of the matter is, it was the greatest Republican victory in the history of the state of Florida.
You just witnessed the first time Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has responded to Donald Trump and all of the attacks that Trump has basically lobbed at him since the midterms, since right before the midterms. And I don't know about you, John, but for me, it just further reinforces what I already thought, which is Trump's probably gonna eat him alive.
See, I didn't know if you thought that.
I do think that.
I mostly think that. I like 80% think that.
Yes, because you're smart.
I think so. Now I think it even more. I'm 100% now. Yeah, and actually, I'm glad that you showed that video because this really demonstrates, to me at least, we'll see if you agree, how you consume your media really makes a difference. Because when you just read a tweet or a headline that says DeSantis strikes back, look at the scoreboard or whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound that bad. I think it's a pretty good point. But when you watch that, that's just Florida Jeb. That's all that is.
Yeah,
the way he's like,
100%.
he keeps like stalling and delaying, and he's like kind of like hesitantly saying it.
He looks nervous.
He looks nervous, and that's when a reporter questioned it. Trump's not staring him down from across the room. And by the way, like once we get past the fact that it seems on its surface to be a good line, you could also dive into the substance of it. So is he generally right that he had the biggest gap or whatever? Okay, I guess, yes, he whooped Charlie Crist for whatever that's worth. But, and I get that he's giving the right wingers what they want in Florida. I don't know this is not a rhetorical question, this is an actual question, especially for people watching the show or in Florida. Has Ron DeSantis done anything impressive that was difficult? Like, did he show savvy and cleverness or an ability to negotiate, or has he overcome any challenges, or has he just done well by giving the Republicans the easy, low-hanging fruit they want in a state that every year is redder than the year it was before, than it was the year before.
Okay, John, we all know it's the latter. We all know that. We all know that. But like, okay, so answered your question. Donald Trump is this country's #1 insult comic. Okay?
After triumph.
For whatever you think about his politics, this is not a commentary about that. He is excellent as an insult comic, absolutely excellent. And if Ron DeSantis thinks that he can nervously, shoot down the insults that Trump will definitely throw in his direction during the primary debates, he's mistaken. Like, he needs to go, you know how whatever the human equivalent of pit bull training is, you know how they train pit bulls to fight, which is disgusting, and then so often you hear about a guy who goes to prison for doing that, and that's where they belong. Yeah, when they're abusing the pit bulls, so they fight each other.
I'm not questioning that. I just don't. No, I get that.
You don't think they should be in prison?
Yes,
is that what it is?
I agree. Okay. I like dogs.
They should be in prison.
That's not what I'm.
For all the abolitionists who freak out about that for abusing the animals, they should be in prison.
Yeah, no, I'd put him in the center of the sun.
Yeah, Ron DeSantis should go to the human equivalent of that and get trained for whatever is gonna come for these primary debates.
Yeah, no, I agree. He should be trained. They should get a bunch of absolutely vicious 17-year-olds to just sit in a circle around him and insult his physical appearance for 6 weeks straight.
100%.
Until he can't, like you, can't feel anything anymore. And it's just dead inside.
100%, yes. Look, Donald Trump is a target-rich environment. The question is, will Ron DeSantis hit him below the belt during these primary debates? I don't think he has it in him.
Well,
yeah, let me give you some more.
Okay, I have a take, but.
Because here's a little taste, all right? Here's a little taste of what DeSantis can look forward to if he does run against Trump in the Republican primary. So recently, meaning today, Trump posted this on Truth Social, okay? So whatever the quote tweet version of Truth Social is.
Rebleeding.
Rebleeding, okay, we'll say that. I know that's not officially the case, but we'll say that. So Patriot takes, never forget that Ron DeSantis made an ad with his baby in a MAGA onesie and called himself a pitbull Trump defender. So Trump made reference to that and said, thanks, Ron. Okay, that's just the beginning. And if you don't remember what that ad looked like, let's refresh your memory.
Everyone knows my husband, Ron DeSantis, is endorsed by President Trump, but he's also an amazing dad. Ron loves playing with the kids.
Build the wall.
He reads stories.
Then Mr. Trump said, "You're fired." I love that part.
He's teaching Madison to talk.
Make America great again.
People say Ron's all Trump, but he is so much more.
Big league. So good.
I just thought you should know.
Ron DeSantis for governor.
Of course, Trump is gonna use that against Ron DeSantis now and potentially in 2024. And then a few other things I wanna mention. So a Trump advisor spoke to the Daily Beast and said this: I'm sure there will be challengers, meaning challengers to Trump, but they better show up ready for war because nothing is off the table. And this person continues to say, Trump's going to end up doing to DeSantis and his wife what he did to Cruz and his wife. So this is another advisor who said this to the Daily Beast. Yeah, anyway, I'll.
Well, and he's already said, Trump has already implied that he's got some secret information about DeSantis and his wife. I don't know how he would know that. Maybe Roger Stone told him something. But let's also remember, it's not like Trump is limited. Well, first of all, he's not limited by common decency or the norms or anything, but he's not even limited by the truth. He'll call DeSantis' wife an assassin or something, or like he just makes stuff up. But here is what DeSantis should have done if he wasn't a little white boot wearing weenie. This is the moment of maybe maximal weakness for Trump. Trump is being abandoned by his allies. He looks terrible. The voters, to the extent that they can be shook about Trump, are right now. He should have come out swinging now. Instead, he gets in his one little thing and then he just wants to like wait 6 months to engage with him. You don't know how strong Trump might be again in 6 months. He should have come out and tried to sink him right now. And it's not like it would have succeeded only if Trump burst into tears or something. It succeeds by you showing strength because the base voters want to see it. That's the only thing that judges how successful it is. And right now, he's projecting weakness. And we know that Trump is worried about this. That's why he announced so early. He's feeling vulnerable. He's giving off that aura, and DeSantis still isn't attacking him.
So I don't.
He's Florida Jeb. He's gonna go down.
Just real quick, I don't even know if I want to give Ron DeSantis advice, although there is one thing about DeSantis that makes me favor him over Trump, which is I don't think that DeSantis has it in him to try to, completely dismantle our democratic process.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas Trump, I mean, he's just shameless and doesn't really care. The other thing I noticed about Trump's speech, which could work against Trump in this battle with DeSantis, Republican voters, with the exception of Trump's like very core supporters and base, are kind of sick of hearing about 2020. And last night during Trump's announcement, I noticed that when he was on script, he didn't really mention 2020. When he went off script, he couldn't help himself.
Yep.
And so we'll see how that kind of factors into this battle moving forward. But I do want to ask you, John, if you could choose the Republican nominee, and it's between DeSantis or Trump, who would you choose?
That is super difficult because of course there's a political calculation and there's the stakes calculation. I agree with you that DeSantis's extremes of how bad he could be as president are not as bad as Trump. Trump could be much worse, but on average, I think DeSantis would be worse. I think DeSantis would get worse things done on average. He would actually care about ridiculous deregulatory policies or tax cutting policies. And with DeSantis as the presidential nominee, it's likely, I think, that the Republicans would do better in terms of the House and the Senate. So he might have the capacity to get more done. Trump, the worst case scenario with Trump is worse, but I think he's a weaker candidate. I think maybe even Biden could beat him, let alone an actual progressive, which we're gonna spend the next 4 years pushing for. And with Trump as the, I'm gonna. And with Trump, I don't know about the Democrats, but with Trump as the candidate, again, I think that he's gonna drag down a lot of other Republicans, which helps us in the House and the Senate, which we need to take back because we desperately need to take back the Supreme Court. And so it's a terrible, risky roll of the dice, but right now at least it can change. I think that we're safer with Trump as the nominee.
Interesting, okay.
It's not up to us though, so.
Yeah, and
what do you think?
I think that that's actually a fair assessment. And the other thing that I would note is, considering that the Republican establishment has soured on Trump, these are the individuals that he would need to effectively dismantle our democratic process.
Yeah.
And without them on his side, that risk or that threat is,
That's true.
I wouldn't say is completely gone, but it's minimized to some extent. So that should factor in.
I want to add one asterisk though, which is that we're assuming that one would be the nominee and that's it. In reality, that may not be how it works out. If Ron DeSantis beats Trump, there's some measurable chance that Trump will set the entire Republican Party on fire and drag down Ron DeSantis.
I really hope Ron DeSantis wins the nomination.
Exactly. I don't know for sure, and I'm not saying.
Good, so good. Please do it. MAGA's back, baby.
I thought you were gonna fall out of your little swivelly chair.
No, I have a very strong back. I did well there.
Okay, great. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it comes in the form of him literally running as a third party candidate or just him dragging him down. But either way, it's hard to imagine him giving like the keynote speech at the RNC and here's your next nominee, Ron DeSantis. Like that's hard to imagine.
Oh, yummy in my tummy. I'm so glad we got to that story. All right, we have very limited times. I'm gonna read a quick comment from our Twitch community. Electric Snow says, MAGA or Massa or move it along, bitch. We all know what Rocky Road tastes like. Thank you for the comment. Bonus episode for our members is next. If you're not a member, what are you doing? You're crazy. tyt.com/join to become one. And we'll see you there. And have a great time.
Florida's ground zero. We're God's waiting room.
Beta! Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into